Okay, welcome everyone. In The Wizard of Oz, Dorothy goes on this great adventure, this great journey. And her journey is to get to the city of Oz so she can find her way back home. So on her journey, she meets all these different people. She learns a lot of lessons, goes through all these different trials and tribulations. And when she gets to the city of Oz, what she discovers is that she could have gone home at any moment, that the power was always within her. And this is the motif of the hero's journey that runs through so many of our stories, where a hero or a heroine goes off to discover something, and while it may appear something external in the beginning, what we always find is there was something on the internal that they were trying to discover, something that was always there. And this is the same motif for the spiritual journey, that what we are looking for when we start off on our path, ultimately we find was already here. It's what Rumi said in the poem that we used in our class the other week. Our task is not to seek for love, but to look for all the barriers that we have built within ourselves around it. And so the path is a path that we have to walk. We can't ask someone else to do this for us. We have to go on the journey ourselves to discover what is already here. And yet on the path, the spiritual journey, just like any journey, there's a lot of pitfalls and a lot of ways that we can think we are on the path, but actually how we get derailed and get off the path, fooling ourselves thinking we're on a spiritual journey when in fact we have gotten off the path long ago. So one of the ways that we do this is that when we imagine that someone who has become enlightened or awakened, self-realized, that we imagine this is a very rare event, and that somehow this is some superhuman feat that only happens for a very few people. And yet, what the path is, the spiritual path, what we are doing on the path is we are peeling back the layers of all of the different images of how we have identified ourselves, all of the different ego identifications. And through peeling back all of those layers, what we ultimately see in the end, once we've exhausted them, is we find our true nature that was covered up behind all of these different images. So this is the most natural thing in the world for us to do, that if we keep looking and peeling back these layers and seeing how these images are not who we are, that eventually we will exhaust them all. And what will be left is our true nature. And while I don't deny that it takes perseverance and it takes dedication and it takes a passion to follow a spiritual journey, this idea that somehow those that have become enlightened are different from us ends up being an obstacle for us on the path. Because what we do is we end up putting them up here and we're down here, right? We idolize these people up here as someone realized, someone special, and we're someone unworthy down here that's never going to be able to get up there. And so what we're doing is creating images of them being worthy and images of us being unworthy. We're creating barriers. We're creating separation. We're creating distance. This is not the path. This is creating more images on the path. And so while we absolutely respect all the enlightened beings that come back and show us the way and tell us, of course we respect them and we can admire them and we can have gratitude for that they are showing us the way. But we don't want to create this separation. That's a dangerous obstacle for us on our path. And we don't want to set this up as something that's so rare. It's the most natural thing in the world for us to ultimately discover who we really are. And so while I'm describing this, pulling back these layers of these different images that we've identified with, ego images, it's not necessarily a linear path, or not always a linear path, because there are times when we just shatter all these images, usually due to some suffering. Maybe we're really upset, someone's worked us up, or someone's disappointed us or rejected us, or something along those lines. And in that, because we've been doing our practices, doing our path, we start to understand what's going on. We have those moments when those images, that unworthy image, that image of I'm a victim, that image of why that person shouldn't have done that to me, when those images just all fall away. And in the absence, what we experience is the peace and the freedom and the love that is our true nature. And even if we only experience it for a few hours, or maybe we experience it for a few days, a few weeks, I mean, sometimes it can be shattered that much, where we can really be free of it for several weeks. We are enlightened in those moments. We have awakened to our true nature. So while most of us here are on a progressive path, I think the more that we see this path realistically, that it is a process of being enlightened, that we don't make enlightenment, and I'm just using that word as a placeholder, I know we can all have different words for it, but that we don't make enlightenment some final destination. Because when we do that, we also create this image of me as enlightened, right? We start to fantasize, oh, when I'm enlightened, I'll float on water, everyone will adore me, I'll only say the perfect thing, I'll never have any problems. And so we create this unrealistic image in our minds that we keep falling short of course, in our everyday lives. And it just creates another obstacle for us. Any image, it doesn't matter what image it is, it's distracting us from the path. We're trying, on the path, we are pulling away these images. We're trying to see how we have identified with all these different images that are covering up who we really are. But yet on the spiritual path, one of the challenges on it is that while we're trying to discard some images, we end up bringing in new images. Me enlightened, or me, the spiritual person, right? There's a whole thing in spiritual practices called spiritual materialism, where people start to cloak themselves in their spiritual practice and want to tell everyone how much they meditate every day and how enlightened their teacher is, and their teacher's the best, and all these retreats that I've done. And it's a way of just creating another image. And there is nothing more annoying than someone telling you how spiritual they are from their ego's perspective. I mean, it's just another image. And then that's not, it's again covering up who we really are. Or even if we have me, the image as the bad spiritual practitioner, because maybe I didn't meditate today, or maybe I lost it, and I had a moment where I wasn't being particularly kind or thoughtful or mindful, right? And now I can hold this image of me as the bad spiritual practitioner. It's just another image. And it's covering up knowing who we really are. Our path, our practice, is to pull back all these layers, all these different images of who we have identified with our whole lives. It doesn't matter what image it is. Me an hour from now being happy. Me 2 weeks from now being happy. Me having some event happening, being happy. It's an image. It's an obstacle into knowing who we really are. So this is one of the challenges for us on the spiritual path, is that we start to get a little distracted. We get distracted by these other images, these more holy images, these more spiritual images. But they're just images. And the more we can see that any image is an obstacle to knowing who we really are, the more we can see that, the more we can taste the qualities of our true nature, of being who we really are. It is our destiny. If we continue on this path, if we keep looking at these images of who we have misperceived ourselves to be and abandon them, eventually we will run out. And what will be left is our true nature. So what we're trying to do is not, and I think we said this a couple weeks ago, like we're not trying to transform ourselves into something else, into another image. We're just peeling back the layers so that we can experience what is already here. This is our destiny. We are on a spiritual journey on this path. And we will, we do experience it already. And every time we do have those experiences, while yes, it comes back up again, those images, they become a little weaker, a little more fragile. And then we start to spend more and more time without any ego image, without any identification whatsoever. And even if it's interrupted by an image, a thought, something arising, as soon as we can recognize that, as soon as we recognize there's another image that's formed and we abandon it, we are back in our true nature again. This is the most natural thing in the world for us to do. It is not superhuman. It does require perseverance and dedication. And of course, we have to follow a path, and we have all the teachings, and we have the meditations, and thousands of meditations, and our mindfulness practices, and rituals, and mantras, and just all of these different things to help us on the path. But eventually there is a point too where we let go of these. That eventually we get to the other, if we think of them, the Buddha has an analogy, like think of it like a raft to get you across to the river, on the other side of the river. Eventually you leave the raft behind when you get there. So these two, not to get too attached, not to create any images out of our practices either. We have to be really careful of this. It's so easy to create these images. And even if they're spiritual images, it is distracting us from the real path, from our real practice.